Crowdfunding for GoldenFox Pictures to support him on my patrons, including Signed Steel Rail, Jack Foley, Courtney Bright, Thomas Fan 3751, Brandon Bishop, Azure Lore, Rainbow Dash Fan, Toxic, and Astrobase. Thank you all so much for your support. For any future updates and upcoming projects you would like to know about, support me on Patreon for occasional blogs where I share what's in the works or any future scheduled releases. That being said, I hope you enjoy this video. After my review of Apple Family Reunion, I was informed that parental deaths was something that the show was not allowed to talk about, and that it was traumatizing to kids. I argued bringing up many titles like The Lion King and The Land Before Time, showing that parental deaths are nothing new and are in fact common. It was later mentioned that parental deaths, or any general loss, was a lot more touchy by TV networks. This was difficult for me to believe since there have been topics like these touched upon before, such as Sesame Street with Mr. Hooper. And mind you, that was a preschool targeted series that's been going on since the 1960s. The same thing can be said for Steven Universe, as Steven's birth was rooted from Rose Quartz self-sacrifice. Turns out that in production of the show, it was said that when Lauren Faust was writing Applejack and the Family, she neglected to write her parents in the show and stated that they may have passed away. Her intention was to minimize the cast of Applejack's close relatives, which, if you ask me, was not very smart at all. Especially considering that Applejack is a character that resembles family, this was of course going to be asked about, as parents are the biggest role of that definition. However, I wasn't the only one. Ever since the beginning of the show, people wanted to know about Applejack's parents, who they were, where they came from, how they got together, and whatever it was that drove them apart. It was always a mystery that was teased throughout, based on a few moments in the series. The first of which was two shooting stars from Apple Family Reunion, as I brought up earlier, which refers to her parents. This was confirmed by storyboard artist Sabrina Alberghetti on Twitter, who's known to be Sibsy. The second of which was the mentioning of the parents at the end of Crusaders of the Lost Mark.
Oh, Sugar Cube, if Mom and Dad were here, they'd be so proud of you.
Oh, thanks, Applejack.
Considering that other characters were getting their exposure with their family counterparts, Applejack's parents was bound to be talked about. Finally, what we get is the Perfect Pear, which to many is a massive favorite. And who would blame them? It's an adorable but beautiful tale about a couple struggling to keep their happiness together from family hardships that eventually lead to heartache, stubbornness, and the consequential outcomes. While it doesn't talk about their death per se, it firmly gives out what makes Applejack and her family strong in the long run. And personally, I'm fine with not having the actual death explained, as the episode delivers the importance of that said family strength. Not only was I happy that we finally got to see and know about their parents, but it was framed conveniently and beautifully through flashbacks by only a word of mouth out of various sides of the story. The way the episode begins, we learn that something is taken issue by Granny Smith after Apple Bloom brings home a jar of pear jam from the market. Applejack and Big Mac inform her that pear jam cannot be brought to the house as there was a feud against pears. And because the emotional severity was so bad, they couldn't ask Granny for further details. It's a mystery that drives Applejack, Apple Bloom, and Big Mac combined to investigate, gather the details from the following ponies: Mrs. Cake, Mare, and a stallion named Burnt Oak. As a result, they learn about their parents through their impacts of the whole story. Now, originally, whenever it came to the idea of the episode about their parents being talked about, I used to only imagine over the years that it would be a formula of taking place in the past, or having Granny Smith tell the experience like a bedtime story, similar to Where the Apple Lies. Except that episode was terrible. However, this was a much clever move on the writers. Instead of being spoon-fed the details straight, it lets the main characters productively explore their identity about their parents themselves. And seeing that they were too young to know about their parents before they passed on, this is a pretty realistic approach, especially given by the length of the series the audience had to wait, as they will only know through a word of mouth. We are put into their shoes to see what the mystery unfolds. Within the flashbacks, we learn from Goldie Delicious that a feud was held between Granny Smith in her younger years and has been confronted with Grandpear, the one Apple Bloom purchased a pear jam from, and is voiced by William motherfucking James Tiberius Kirk Shatner. But unlike the present, Grandpear was very snotty and competitive to Granny, and thus explains how the feud began. A part of me isn't too surprised about this because based on what the show has given us regarding the Apple family, pride is a huge part that plays up. At the same time, however, marketing and gathering your customers is a huge part of making your business successful. It's not just about how their businesses are better, it's an instinctive threat and uphill battle in their financial stability. This, compared to Super Speedy, does a much better job on the topic of business practices. I know I've said more about that episode, but the competitive nature here is much more organic. Instead of being irrational or being hit with a stupid stick over any decision made for plot convenience, the lead up to this episode is simple to where something as minimal as this feud can lead you to the worst. So, with regard to the parents, they are Pear Butter and Bright Mac. This couple is talked about by others after Goldie Delicious, and these two lovebirds take the majority of the episode. It's an instant love at first sight that started all the way back to their infancy. I normally would take issue with this since this cliche generally undermines any prior development. However, given how nasty the feud is, this puts them under tough circumstances. They even said they're not supposed to talk to each other, but like most young children, they have a sense of morbid curiosity. Not to mention that because of how harsh the atmosphere is, the obligation of being rebellious was bound to happen. As a result, they both feel comfortable and rewarded, having a casual talk and enjoying themselves outside of their family circles, or having to put up with any strict rules. We see from small moments that Smith and Pear are so strict and so focused on their business that it leaves their offspring to take action in their own hooves to pursue their own happiness. But aside from their immediate and rebellious affection, what else do we know from them? From Bright Mac, we learn that he's upfront and honest, but is also a bit quirky, competitive, and arrogant, showing off in front of Pear Butter when surprising her a stone carve of their cutie marks. By this point, we learn where his traits were passed on to. Applejack with her honesty and hat, and from his massive strength and body design, Big Mac. From Pear Butter, we learn that she's a bit on the bubbly side. Cliche to be sure, but that's natural simplicity for you. But more importantly, we learn that she is a dedicated mare who has helped out Mrs. Cake in search of her own talent and how she got her own cutie mark. Thus, it's passed on to Apple Bloom as a specialist in finding identity of their personal talent and cutie marks, along with wanting to know about their very own. Additionally, as another passing trait to Applejack, we learn that she can play music as we are shown in one of the most beloved songs ever written in the series. You're in my head like a catchy song.
We're far apart in every way, but you're the best part of my day. And sure as I breathe the air, I know we are the perfect pair.
Where do I begin? Is it a typical love song? Yeah. Is it overly cheesy by the acoustic guitar work? Yeah. Is it one of the most cliche montages in the progress and how they stick together as a couple in any other rebellious-based romance story you could ever possibly think of? Yeah. But I can't help it. It's simple, it's adorable, and the melody itself is absolutely wonderful. The atmosphere that is brought forth and the chemistry from these two makes the song so much more appreciated that it feels much more rewarding and that they'll do whatever it takes to stick together through these said hardships. I said before with my cadence of my top 10 favorite fandom rock songs that lyrics like those I can actually connect with, as it's a part of what makes a relationship strong. Referring back to Mrs. Cake, we learn that she was originally named Chiffon Swirl and that she didn't know what to do with her life until Pear Butter assisted. This does bring questions and possibly encourage headcanons between the potential legal name changes and the nature of cutie marks. The topic about cutie marks have always left me fascinated, as it would encourage young kids to think about their livelihood over their personal hobbies. But over time, they've been left in question over the years that there have been some contradictions and other moments that were controversial. Personally, I'd rather not talk about this any further since I'm here to address the criticisms in this episode and not share much personal theories. I have done so in the past and they haven't done well in my favors at all. I will, however, say that out of the many characters in the show, Mrs. Cake was one of the few characters I least expected to have some development. The very fact that Mrs. Cake was involved and how she became a baker we remember today was still pretty surprising to me. And I am personally glad to see that, as having other characters be fleshed out bring more life to the world than just the main characters, and the overall establishment of what value brings forth of those said characters. This also includes Goldie Delicious once again returning and showing what hasn't been forgotten about the Apple family history. Speaking of which, we learn a new character named Burnt Oak, who was a firewood salesman and was once close friends with Bright Mac. I love his design, and I love his old man voice that makes you feel welcome whenever he shares his side of the story. There was even a moment with Big Mac as he requested to visit Oak more often for further historic details. It's touching as there's a personal weight between them. This moment gave me the impression that he may appear again for another episode regarding further family history. Unfortunately, I never saw Oak again after the past 2 seasons, and with season 9 being the last, I'm doubtfully worried if we'll ever see Burnt Oak again. I'm not saying that'll be the case, but if by any chance he does come back, I'll be more than happy. I really like how he presented himself. I otherwise would only have to take this as a closer connection to the family is brought forth as time is healing. Looking no further than that is Grandpère himself. The final bit is explained by Mare as she was the officiant of a secret wedding planned out by Bright Mac. This is largely because the pairs are moving elsewhere, and Pear Butter reluctantly but happily agrees to accept the proposal before she is supposedly gone. Things stir, however, as they get caught, and what follows is one of the most heart-wrenching moments I've ever witnessed in the show. Aside from being snotty and causing a feud with the apples, Grandpère's stubbornness eventually leads him to the very commitment that roots all the way back to the emotional severity that Granny Smith has.
You can't be serious. Are you choosing to be an apple over being a pear?
Are you making me choose?
Yes, I am.
Then yeah, I guess I am.
Fine.
This really hit me hard. Grandpère's own daughter having to make a sacrifice because of his own anger, hate, and disgust drove him away. Seeing where it leads to the present, it's very easy to tell how regretful he is when coming back and why Granny's anger was so severe. The fact that he abandoned his own daughter because of his own pride is already a cruel move, but what's worse is that after all the years of anger, this was the last time he saw his beautiful daughter. That alone will haunt anyone for the rest of their lives. This to me is what makes Grandpère a great role model. Role models are often a drive of a positive moral influence, but what I gain from Grandpère is based negatively on his lesson from the overall experience. You can't let your emotions control over something so valuable in your life, or you will regret it. This is a rarity, but I appreciate that this was written in on top of the overall theme of having a competitive nature. After everything we, the audience, and what the Apple siblings have learned, what makes this episode powerful is not only self-discovery, but that no matter what troubles you face, no matter what obstacles you encounter, and no matter what the severity is and the stance of your family, sticking together with who you have left is still important because it can and will make your family strong. Parents are often cited as a major portion of what resembles family, but it's not always the case with everyone. And seeing that the Apples, knowing that said resemblement, stick together can especially connect to those who have had parental losses when they were young or have been adopted to another family. It took a while for this episode to happen, but given its setup, easily put into their hooves, the final result was very rewarding. On top of the fact that it's very touching, emotionally striking, the callbacks to other characters were a nice touch, and the unveiling mystery behind Applejack's parents was an exciting experience. I know that getting to know more about Pear Butter and Bright Mac may not happen again, given the circumstances of the passing, but as is, I'm very satisfied with what we were given. Thank you, DHX. Thank you. Until next time, I'm GoldenFox, and take care.